Thanks everyone for making a choice to show up today. What you're aspiring towards is to see things through the lens of the soul, which means, if nothing else for right now, the neutral observer. You're seeing it through that lens, but you're still experiencing it for now through the personality. Do you see? You're not trying to get rid of the personality. You chose the personality for a certain reason. Do you see? But the energies that stir you the most, until it can be really clean, is the energies that are going to cause you some notice turmoil, some suffering. Do you see? Some frustrations for some anxieties, some depressions, whatever it may be. But those aren't bad things. Those are things that are trying to help you see more clearly through your lens of the soul. And when you get a little far off that lens, then those energies are very loving. They're trying to support you and say, hey, let's give you that loving nudge. You see, that's the soul's compassion for you. See if you can see it that way. Things can be pointed out to you, so then the put in whatever adjective you like. In my example, the depressive energies are one of your greatest supporters. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's the idea, is how do you not try to necessarily beat up the depressive energies, but how do you work your way through it to where they can teach you? You see, the lens of the soul does that. The personality is experiencing it, but if the personality tries to interpret it, the personality is going to blame all types of factors in the physical and emotional world. Do you see? Inside of you and outside of you. I'm going to ask you guys a question. We're going to play around with a couple of questions and talking points tonight. So close your eyes for a second. And I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to envision yourself answering this question. Like, in other words, I'm going to ask a question and then picture I call out your name and say, give us your thought on this. Okay? What does it mean to find yourself? How do you find yourself? Okay, now we'll open up, and the reason I want you to have an answer will become maybe evident. So now we'll open it up to you guys. Who wants to give an answer or an insight? Go ahead. But people talk a lot about finding themselves and doing all kinds of things, and they really focus on steps they think they need to take instead of just, it's a subtraction. And so at first, it's a subtracting just to get to that, your authentic truth. But what will shift over time is not the finding, but the self. You see, so at first it's getting to know your true personality and being able to carry that same vibration in all aspects of your life. But so many people think like, I have to be this way at work, and then this way at the meditation center, and then this way with my family, and then this way. Because it's a little bit safer, maybe. But then it's not really your authentic self. You're kind of being guided by everyone else's expectations of who you're supposed to be. But if you can start looking at that over time, those personalities will fade into the background, and it'll become a little bit easier to see when they pop up sometimes in the future. You'll recognize it. You see, so none of the personalities ever really die off. They're just not your point of focus anymore. And then eventually there's a letting go of that personality as well. And the more you do that, the more that neutral observer, that lens, starts to look at it. And the more that you do that, then it's a little bit easier to really allow your personality then to come back alive. It's kind of strange. But you chose that personality, so there are certain things in there that you're trying to learn through those experiences. You see? And so it's difficult as you start seeking on your spiritual path, because people start to become so spiritual that they don't realize where they're becoming corrupted. And then all of a sudden they're spiritually trying to control other people, or spiritually trying to act a role like I always need to be, no matter what, smiling, or no matter what, walking around like this, or playing the different roles. And then you're still in that same loop again. You see? So the idea is to try to walk through these things, to discover and let go of the illusions and all the mask and all the doubts and the fears and all those kinds of things that just prevent you from being you. Because the idea is, the more you allow yourself to be you, the more you're going to start to be engaged in the present moment. The more then you start being able to let go of the past. And the more the future starts filling in. And so all the things that you were seeking, once you let go of those desires to seek, and you just be you, the more that they just are revealed. So it's kind of backwards. And that's what you all mean in the theory of it when you say getting to the truth of who you are, or the remembering who you are. So the idea in this first meditation is we're learning how to walk through the illusions. And so we'll go through a little step process of doing this, see what comes up. And so I think the reasons that tonight's meditations are kind of open-ended in a way is because you're going to fill in the factual scenarios. Does that kind of make sense? You guys ready to play? Any questions? We'll see what happens. To drop into your state, or raise up to your state, whatever it is for you. Allow yourself to broaden your perspective. So the first things that we're going to deal with in this, we're going to deal with the physical plane. So the physical plane is the external world. So think of some encounters in the external world. Maybe some ones encounters you had this week. The key word for dealing with the physical world as we walk through these planes to get closer to true presence is detachment. The detachment of faithful surrender. So how do you detach from the things detach from your vehicle, detach from your job, detach from your clothes, your personal attachment to cleanliness, the projects, how do you detach from your senses? How do you personally detach from people? How do you faithfully surrender your expectations? How do you detach from owning your story?
Can we let him out?
How do you detach from talking? Let go of your senses. Have some faith and surrender the personal need to control results. In the physical plane, the outside world, doing so brings in the spirit of grace. The outside world, the mantra, all is well. Notice what this feels like subtly. And then we move to the plane of the emotions, the lower thoughts, the inside world, with the key word of dispassion. As we're starting to move from the outside to the internal, We're less swayed by other scripts, by others' opinions, or others' judgments. As we move further in, and with dispassion, we release pleasure and pain. We release our reactions. Let go of desire. And in its place stands a pure, steady love. A freedom of movement. And as we learn to interact with our experiences with dispassion, we discover the spirit of peace. We bring forth the mantra. The waters are calm. And with this spirit of peace, we're positioned to seek out what is rather than what we desire. As we work our way through these fields of illusion, distortions, we start to enter the mental plane. And now we pick up our next tool, that of discrimination. We recognize an awareness of an intelligent choice. First choice, we get to decide where to focus. We get to see a true reality existing in the present moment. We see clear choices between love and hate. Between the long and short term. Between the self and the not self. Between control and acceptance. the power of discrimination. You see the silver lining in all that we encounter. At this level, we encounter the spirit of joy. Our mantra, aligned with purpose. So, we're going to walk through it one more time. Try not to apply it this time to any factual scenario, but just see what it feels like in the outer world. As the faithful surrender comes in, you detach. Knowing all is well. In the inner world, you're no longer seeking or avoiding based on pleasure or pain. You use a dispassion to calm the waters so you can step into the true presence. And in that presence, there's an awareness of choice. A power in rightful discrimination. Realizing that everything in life is about a choice. To control or to accept. A choice to approach it with only your personality or with the spirit. Feel the spirit of grace, of peace, and of joy. And then look at it with the experience of your authentic self. Where do you find yourself on this journey? And can you be all right with that? You see, a lot of people they can look at their strengths and then they look at other people's strengths and say, why can't I have their strengths too? But for some reason we want to not be all right with whatever our deficits are. We all have deficits. You can't try to be all things to all things, or you wouldn't be coming into an individual personality, right? But if you can be honest with what your things are, that's your cues and your clues to the building blocks towards your purpose. Your lens. You see, all the clues are already there. Your soul already made choices. We get so caught up in trying to, and I'm not saying right or wrong, it's a great thing to have compassion, for instance, for that one girl's little lifetime. But when you pull it back from the soul, start to ask and see, why did she choose that lifetime? You see, people focus on the difficulties or what choice would I make in her shoes? So maybe that's a question that she's here to pose for you guys. Or maybe she's here to inspire other people. Who knows? Do you see? But a lot of these things are already written out as far as the big signpost along somebody's lifetime. Do you see? Sometimes it's hard for us to see because we're down here, caught up in these individual actions, not seeing the real big picture. Do you see? And we don't have to. And that's the hard part, is when you start to pull back from those things. But oftentimes it's those difficult things in our life that are just trying to wake us up to certain things. But we get so caught up in calling those difficult things bad because we call them painful and we want to get rid of them instead of seeing what they're trying to stir up. That's the beauty of the suffering. Anyone have anything they want to share through that meditation? So the idea, for instance, is, let's say almost all of you have been to the sweat lodge. So we go down there and we clean up the grounds. There's a difference between cleaning up the grounds because of a personal attachment versus a spiritual cleansing. Do you see? So what you're doing in a way is learning how to let go of the personality attachments to it, but as you let go, it creates a space for the spiritual revealments. Do you see? That's why, like when we show sometimes people to build a fire, at first when they build a fire, they're building an altar, they have all this physical attachment to how it needs to be organized and how it needs to be colored and how it needs to be. And what you do is you start letting go of the attachments to the physical ways that you're perceiving things to allow the spiritual intuitions to come in. You see? Because sometimes physically it might not look perfect, but spiritually it is. Do you see? So it's really subtle when we say detach. What you're doing is you're creating a space for something new. And even though we walked you through detaching first from the physical plane and the outer world, and then second, the emotional dispassion, and then into the mental plane of the discrimination, and then there's later attributes that might come alive for you, or new keywords as you do those things and connect into the soul's teachings. The actual way that you would do it, if you were walking through the path, is not to detach first. It's the personality, the physical because that's what you're most connected to, right? The physical world for most people. Although, like we've said in the last few weeks, for instance, young children, certain pets, dementia, autisms, and stuff like that are more connected into the astral than the physical timeline. You really start with dispassion. And then you go into the discriminations to help you let go with the detachments. The attachments kind of come last. So there's a pathway to it if you want to play around with it a little bit. If you're trying to connect up to your spiritual self. So you see what happens. If you can let go of the words, the spirit behind the things will do the stuff. You don't have to have the thinking mind understanding and processing it all. For some of you, that's fine in the beginning, but you have to get to a point to release those. You see, that's why we walk through the attachment, to let go of the physical senses, and then eventually to let go of the astral senses. Even the clairvoyances and those kinds of things. Even those are part of the illusion. They're an important part, and they can really empower you and transform your desire into aspirations. But I'm just saying eventually those two can be let go of. You see, because what we're learning to do is go get through these planes, the illusionary planes, you see. You see, it's tough because you can have a lot of loving intent, and that's what can really cloud it. We all have it, and the idea is just to try to notice those things and give it some freedom and see what comes up, and then let the subtle energies teach you in your own way. And so all the breadcrumbs are already there. And that's what you're figuring out. That's what we all figure out in our own way. That's why we build our own path. Some will do it by having more visions. Some will do it by having more feelings. Some will do it by having more intuitions or whatever. And that's the beauty of it. Have fun with it and play with it and have that faithful surrender. Do you see? It's the weird thing is that as long as you have the desire for the answers, you're still going to be without the answers. They'll reveal themselves to you through your experiences. And then it's just how well can you get at getting past your own bullshit? Because we all have it in our own layers. It's hard for us to picture this, but we've all had many different lives already in this lifetime. You're not the same person you were when you were 12 years old, when you were 21 years old. But it's hard for us to see that, because it's kind of a blur. It's kind of like hard for us to see how tall we get, right? But it's happening. And sometimes old personalities are going to pop up. And you try not to shun them. Just try to see what it's trying to teach. It feels great when you're at your high moments as you go through these cycles. The way that I understand it, as you get closer towards learning how to not be so attached to the physical and the emotional and the thoughts and stuff like that, then you'll start to get less swayed by the things like the tides and the planets and stuff like that. But there's still another cycle in there that you go through. It's a soul cycle of an up and down that goes in accordance to a certain number of days and things like that. And so the idea is that you are all right as best you can with enjoying the low days as much as the high days. And that takes a mastery. And can you be all right with that? You know what I mean? Can I see my depressive state with as much blessing as I see when I'm all high and mighty? Do you see? So I'll ask you another question. You ready? Let's see. Ready? Drop into you. Ask yourself this question. And just see what comes up for you. What causes your stressors? So come up with one that is a good stressor for you. Maybe it came up this week. It could be a work deadline. It could be a car breaking down. It could be an adult saying something to you or not saying something to you, or how they responded or whatever. You see? So it's important to be honest. So we can all come up with our philosophical answers, and they can be perhaps accurate. That it is not the outside things that cause us stressors, but our interpretations of it based on our need to control it or our thoughts about it, right? But just because you know that doesn't mean the stressor goes away if you're still attached to it. You see? And it's all right. So maybe that thing has something to teach you still. Can you love that thing? Because the idea is if you can love that thing, it might go to something to the next stage below and continue to teach you if you want. The thing is, until you really start seeing things through the soul lens and can really start to step back and not have the blocks. See, we have all these blocks, and if you could remove the blocks, it becomes really clear, and you can get answers like that, and you don't have to then revert back and try to go into the darkness, and you can just have the light teach you. But it's really hard to teach people that just the light can teach you when there's so much distortions in their lower planes. But if you can pick one of these things and start to look at it through certain angles and stuff like that, maybe it'll reveal itself to you, and you can get to what the truth of the matter is most of us are living the lives that we learned when we were somewhere between 7 and 10 years old. And we just keep replaying it. We learned, here's how I'm supposed to act in the emotional world to get friends, to get rewards, or to be protected. You see? And so we've built up these layers, and so if you can see what thing might be triggering you, and you can identify it to something like how Bryce had his great insight of the fear of rejection, then there might be something below that. And once you get to the lower part, then you can just set it free. Once you have the awareness of it. You can look it in the eye and you give it room, it sets it free. And it'll teach you. You'll have that aha moment, and then all of a sudden the coloration that you gave it so many years ago will leave. And then it'll just be a black and white, kind of like just watching a movie. For some of you. For some of you, that analogy might not be a good one. For instance, when Teresa watches a movie, she really gets into it, and she's like, she really feels into it. So maybe that's not a good example for me to give in her case. But do you see what I'm saying? All that the astral world is doing is it's coloring things in. And as long as certain things have certain colors, you're going to have certain reactions. This passion doesn't mean you don't feel it anymore, but you release the desires between pleasure and pain. So we're going to drop into our last meditation tonight. And what we're going to play around with this time, I have to see how this one works out. So I'm going to try to explain it to you for a moment as I explain it to myself. So as you heard me talking, the hard thing to do is as you're looking at something, you don't see your distorted view of your personality, what it's applying onto things. So what we're going to do is you come up with whatever your stressor is. Have a stressor event or person or interaction or whatever. It doesn't have to be a 10 out of 10 type thing, but choose one wherever it is. And instead of you looking at it, we're going to call in different archetypes to look at it. So we're going to call in, these archetypes are all a part of you, but they're just slightly different, thinner lenses to look at something from and see what that archetype might say about that situation. So drop into your meditative state. Don't worry about the expectations or the outcomes. You're just trying to see things from a sliver of a lens. And what we're going to do is we're going to build each archetype before you look at the scenario. Okay? Let's see, where are we going to go? You're going to build yourself a small room, but this room is a cave that has six different torches. In 6 different directions. In the middle of this cave, you go and sit with your fire. This is the fire of your spirit. And as you turn around and face the entrance, a screen drops down. And that screen is going to be the experience that you bring in a little bit. Turn your back to that screen and face your fire again. Allow your personality to fully blend in with the light of that fire. Allow it to stay there. And then you're going to turn towards one of the lights. Pick a light. That first light is the archetype of the lover. Allow that light to be embodied. And as the lover comes over and stands in front of you, turns towards the screen of the experience you want to encounter, how does that lover interpret that experience? Allow the lover to guide you. Set your personality down. Notice the details of the lover. As that flame came alive. And then slowly pull back. Put that torch back over in the corner of the wall where you got it from. And next we're going to pick up another torch. The archetype of the warrior. Allow that warrior to come to life to teach you. To give you a certain lens. And now how might that warrior look at that experience? How does that lens different from the lover? Thank the warrior. Send that spirit back to that fire, to that individual torch. Because now we're going to pick up another archetype. The archetype of the child. Bring that lens forward. Allow that spirit to come to life. And see how the child might look at that. Try not to put your personality over the child. Visualize or feel that child. How might that child have been different than that spirit of the warrior, the spirit of the lover? Think the child, send that child archetype back to the torch that you got it from. Time to choose torch number 4. This archetype is the archetype of the disciplinarian. Allow that spirit to take form. The helper spirit coming forward with this loving light. What might the disciplinarian add or subtract? Disciplinarian focuses on the actions now for the results way down the road. Thank the disciplinarian. Allow that archetype to go back. Torch number 5. Bring forth the magician. What do you see in your mind's eye? What do you intuit? Thank the magician. Put the torch back. It's time to awaken the archetype of the elder. What insights does the elder share as you look at that screen? Put that torch back. Thank the elder. And now look down into the coals of your central fire. Start stirring around the coals until you find one more archetype you want to call forward. You choose the archetype, the lens. Choose one. Bring it to life. Ask for clarity. And then look at that screen one more time through this lens. Thank whichever archetype you called forward. Now look back at that screen again with your individual personality. How might you see things a little bit differently? What new insights have come forward? This is no different than before you incarnated. There's going to be certain neutral experiences that you wanted to try to attract into this one lifetime, and you chose certain archetypes. There's always that power of choice. Thank the fires. Thank the spirits. Thank the experiences. The opportunity to learn and grow. Then begin to bring yourselves back to the room. We'll go around the room and see if there's anything that's come up for any of you guys. Any insights, any struggles, epiphanies, whatever it may be. So the idea is, like, for instance, it's really difficult for people as you're dealing with a stressor to try to just discard the stressor, because what you're trying to discard it with is your usual personality. And your usual personality says that stressor really sucks. Do you see? So if you can start building in these different perspectives and you can bring them to life, you can build your own archetypes to not only bring you out of certain things, but also to let you see things through different lenses than just the personality's lens. And so the idea over time is, if you wanted to, use this tool to teach you, along with that first meditation, how to work through these planes to get to the lens of the soul. Each of your archetypes will take on their own personality, not your personality. Do you see? So you're giving them the space to come alive so they can be a support system for you. If you don't do that, eventually it's going to just become you again. Do you see? So you got to give them that space. That's what we were talking about on the first meditation. We said the desire transforms into that pure love that gives a freedom instead of a control. Cool, thanks. The idea is that through these, remember those key words of detachment, dispassion, and discrimination. And that's what these are just things, different approaches to get towards those, leading to the spirits of the grace, the peace, and the joy. And continuing. Anyway, the idea is that bringing in different archetypes can help you, for instance, not just with seeing things different lenses so you're not so caught in your personality, but also finding your way into dispassion to where you try not to prefer one archetype over the other. You know that you have a preference because your personality is there, but pulling yourself back to the soul to allow different ones to come forward and giving them the freedom to teach you. Do you see? So as you choose your different archetypes, if you want to play around with it, you allow whatever to come forward. Because ultimately you're in charge, so you're pulling back. And now you're making the choices instead of having the choices tell you who you are. You start to see that the experiences are neutral. It's just your interpretations or your controls over them that drive you mad. The lower thought forms. Do you see? Because they're all the same. And once you can see, remember I haven't given this in a while, but I've said it many times in the past, because I think this one is more personal towards me, but you're a kid and you go into the fridge and there's only a jar of peanut butter and you're like, life sucks, there's nothing, this is terrible. And then a homeless person comes and opens up the fridge and sees that jar of peanut butter and they're like, there is a God, thank you so much. It's the same jar of peanut butter. Do you see? And so in order to get to a true loving lens, I'm not talking about love like I need a partner or I want people to appreciate me, and all that's beautiful. But I'm talking about the loving lens of the soul is to see things through all perspectives. And that's kind of what compassion is. It doesn't mean that it sways your personality one way or another from being your truth, but it allows you to see things. So that way you focus on your intention. And sometimes your intention as you speak your truth is going to harm others. But as long as that wasn't your intention and you're not speaking out of pain because you have certain desires towards outcomes, you let the cards fall as they fall. You see? Because sometimes what will happen is you'll start to discover that spirit is moving through you. Do you see? Maybe you're the vehicle for that person to get their lesson right now. And it's not always pleasant. And maybe you're being an idiot and you're the one that needs the lesson. And you don't see it because you keep thinking you're trying to control someone else to see what the truth is. Oftentimes, that's what it is. Do you see? But no matter what, love it. So it can teach you. Because in either case, you don't have to know, but you're getting closer towards your truth. And you'll know as you get closer and closer towards your truth, because you'll be revealing more of yourself, and probably the tears are going to start to flow. Because you're not having all these outside walls anymore, these distortions of who you think you were, or who you think you're supposed to be. You see? It'll just be more natural. It's the same thing when you get towards your deepest desires. If you tried to speak your deepest desires, there's no way you can speak those without tearing up. No way. And so just speak your desires. And if you're not tearing up, you know you're not your deepest ones yet. But it's giving you a path towards it, do you see? You got to speak your truth. And be honest with it. Be honest with your faults. And that's what we're slowly getting closer towards learning here, is being all right with that. You can see over time people are starting to reveal more about themselves and be open and honest with whatever it is. You see, it's not the fact of what it is. It just feels like that because you're connected to the physical and emotional illusions. Eventually you get beyond that, and the subtle energies will start to teach, and love will come forward, and things will be revealed. The more that you can let go of those attachments and those desires. So what happens is they transform. What you're doing is, see, that's why the people that are really emotional are the stronger meditators in the long run. Because they learn how to really transform that, and then they have really powerful movement when the inspirations come in, because then they know how to direct it. Now they have the emotion, instead of a weakness, as a superpower that's guided by the intellectual rationalizations to bring it into the physical brain consciousness onto this plane. Do you see? So it's got to reverse itself back through again. So it's not like you're letting go of these things forever. You're just learning how to release those so you can be guided, and then you bring it into this realm. I guess that's the best way I can explain it. And you'll get your motivations for your purpose and stuff like that. Anything before we close out? I don't see the soul's path as being discomfortable at all, because it doesn't have attachment or desires for outcomes. It just has a purpose. Do you see? At a minimum, I have faith that I made that choice. So what we're trying to do is be as powerful as you can in your field of influence and in the relationships that you encounter. And for some of us, that might just be our immediate family. And for some of us, that might reach across the globe a little bit. In other words, in this lifetime, it might be that we're just supposed to impact one other, or it might be a million others. Whatever that is, that's written. That doesn't matter. Do you see? Being all right with that, not trying to lead other people's lives. And if you just do that work in whatever your field of influence is, that will shift humanity. You see? Naturally. That's how you do. When you do that soul work, that naturally influences humanity and helps raise consciousness without trying to do that, without trying to save the world. Do you see? Because as soon as you start trying to save the world, now you're getting into control issues again. You stay in your field, and then you allow the ripples to do their work. So from the last time we got together, true soul purpose, and this is where it gets difficult, has nothing to do with the individual personalities. So it's really hard with the thinking mind to separate those two. So the individual has certain work or dharma that they're doing or whatever. But the soul purpose, that service, has nothing to do with that. That might feed into it, but it has nothing to do with that. The sole purpose is seeing things through a group objective. So what I'm trying to point out there mainly is that so often as people are starting to get to a place where they think they're being of service or waking up to spiritual things, they think they need to change the world. And in doing that, they have just sunken back in to control, because they think they have the answers. And as long as you're thinking, you're separate, you see. And so the idea is, how do you accept the world? How do you accept everything that you encounter, knowing that the experiences outside of you are neutral? They're being swayed by the experiences going on inside of you. Do you see? And that's why it's an important balance.